Every morning we awaken to a battlefield, not one of swords and shields, but of choices and habits. These habits are stealthy. They creep into our lives as uninvited guests, making a home in the recesses of our mind. To live consciously, to thrive, is to confront these habits daily. Procrastination is a quiet force that often goes unnoticed until it has already woven itself into the fabric of our daily lives. It does not arrive with a loud declaration. Instead, it whispers softly, nudging us toward postponing the tasks that matter most. It lulls us into a false sense of security, convincing us that there will always be more time, that the weight of responsibility can be shouldered tomorrow. Yet beneath its gentle facade lies a far more insidious reality, a thief stealing away opportunities, progress, and the fulfillment of potential. When we procrastinate, we trade the clarity of action for the haze of delay. It begins subtly, often disguising itself as practicality or self-preservation. I'll start when I feel ready. We tell ourselves as though readiness is something that arrives of its own accord, uninvited and without effort. But readiness is not a gift, it is a product of engagement, of immersing oneself in the task at hand, despite the discomfort or uncertainty that might accompany it. By waiting for the elusive moment of perfect conditions, we surrender the agency that lies in simply beginning. Procrastination thrives on rationalizations. It seduces us with the idea that small delays are inconsequential, that a few minutes spent elsewhere will not impact the larger goal. These moments compound, however, creating a cascade of missed opportunities. What starts as a single act of deferral can evolve into a pattern that defines our days, weeks, and years. Each moment deferred becomes a thread in a web of inaction, binding us tighter to the inertia we seek to escape. One of the most deceptive aspects of procrastination is how it magnifies the difficulty of the tasks we avoid. The longer we put something off, the more daunting it appears in our minds. A simple task, once delayed, grows into an insurmountable obstacle. This phenomenon feeds a vicious cycle. The fear of difficulty fuels avoidance, and avoidance amplifies the perception of difficulty. Breaking free requires an act of courage, starting before the weight of hesitation becomes too great to bear. Procrastination also preys on our discomfort with imperfection. Often we delay not because the task itself is overwhelming, but because we fear we won't do it well enough. The pursuit of perfection becomes an excuse for inaction, as if it's better to do nothing at all than to risk producing something flawed. Yet perfection is an illusion, and progress is always born from the willingness to embrace imperfection and learn from the process. To procrastinate in the name of waiting for perfection is to deny ourselves the chance to grow through experience. Procrastination disconnects us from the present moment. It draws our attention away from what can be done now, pulling us into a liminal space where we exist neither fully in action nor entirely at rest. This state of suspension leaves us restless and dissatisfied, for there is no fulfillment in avoidance. True satisfaction comes from engaging with the moment, from meeting the challenges before us and giving ourselves fully to the task at hand. Time is perhaps the most finite and precious resource we possess, yet procrastination tempts us to squander it as though it were infinite. The hours we spend delaying action are hours we cannot reclaim. This loss is not always immediately apparent, but over time it accumulates, leaving us with the bitter realization of what could have been. The regret that follows is often heavier than the discomfort we sought to avoid in the first place. Procrastination is not an enemy to be vanquished once and for all. It is a daily encounter, a recurring choice we must confront. Each moment presents an opportunity to resist its pull, to take a step, no matter how small, toward action. By recognizing its presence and understanding its tactics, we can begin to dismantle its hold on our lives. In doing so, we reclaim the power to direct our days with intention and purpose. Negative self-talk is a quiet but persistent voice that shapes the way we see ourselves and the world around us. It does not shout, it whispers, creeping into our thoughts and embedding itself as truth. Often it emerges so subtly that we don't recognize it for what it is, an internal critic fueled by fear, doubt, and past experiences. Over time, these unkind words create a distorted narrative, painting an inaccurate picture of our abilities and potential. This voice often arises from deeply rooted insecurities or experiences where we felt inadequate. It begins with a seemingly harmless thought, a questioning of our worth or capability. What if I fail? Or I'm not good enough for this. Such thoughts might feel fleeting, but they have the power to grow. They repeat themselves, gaining strength with each recurrence, until they feel like undeniable truths. These thoughts often thrive in the silence of introspection, weaving stories of insufficiency that color our decisions and interactions. Negative self-talk is insidious because it presents itself as logical and rational. It convinces us that its judgments are based on facts pointing to past mistakes or setbacks as evidence. Yet it disregards the complexity of human experience, ignoring growth, effort, and the courage it takes to try again. It emphasizes shortcomings while dismissing achievements, leaving us trapped in a cycle of self-doubt. This creates a lens through which we begin to interpret all aspects of life, leading to a skewed perception of reality. The impact of negative self-talk extends beyond our thoughts. It influences our actions. When we tell ourselves that we are not capable, we begin to avoid opportunities that challenge us. We hold back from pursuing goals or dreams, fearing failure before we even attempt. This self-imposed limitation stifles growth and keeps us in a state of inertia, convinced that safety lies in not trying at all. Over time, this avoidance reinforces the narrative, creating a cycle where inaction feeds the belief in our inadequacy. One of the most damaging aspects of negative self-talk is its ability to affect our relationships, not just with others, but with ourselves. When we consistently berate ourselves, we erode the trust and compassion we need to thrive. Instead of being our own ally, we become our harshest critic. This internal battle often leads to feelings of loneliness and disconnection, as we struggle to reconcile the gap between who we are and who we think we should be. The words we use in self-talk carry immense power. Even when spoken silently, they shape the way we feel, act, and perceive the world. These words can either build us up or tear us down. The repetition of negative phrases becomes a mantra, reinforcing patterns of doubt and fear. Just as a seed planted in fertile soil grows into a strong tree, the seeds of self-talk, whether positive or negative, grow into beliefs that guide our lives. Negative self-talk, left unchecked, can become a forest of barriers, obscuring the path to our potential. Often this voice mirrors the external criticisms we have heard or absorbed over time. It echoes the judgments of others, internalizing their doubts as our own. Over the years, these echoes take on a life of their own, persisting long after the external voices have faded. This is why it is so vital to recognize that the voice of negative self-talk is not inherently our own. It is a learned habit, a reflection of past experiences, but it does not define who we are or what we can become. Negative self-talk thrives in the absence of awareness. It operates in the shadows, unnoticed and unchallenged. Bringing it into the light is the first step toward understanding its origins and questioning its validity. Each time we observe a negative thought, we create space between ourselves and that thought, recognizing it as an aspect of the mind rather than an absolute truth. In this awareness lies the opportunity to break the cycle, to replace doubt with curiosity, and to choose words that uplift rather than diminish. Seeking constant validation is a habit that can subtly take hold of our lives, shaping our decisions, thoughts, and actions. It often begins innocently, a natural human desire to be seen, understood, and appreciated. Yet when this desire becomes a persistent need, it begins to erode our sense of self and anchor our worth in the opinions and reactions of others. Instead of finding fulfillment within, we become entangled in a cycle of seeking approval, chasing a fleeting sense of worthiness that is always just out of reach. The need for validation stems from a deep longing for acceptance. It is rooted in the fear of rejection or inadequacy, a quiet voice within us that asks, "Am I enough?" This question drives us to look outward for affirmation, hoping that others will provide the reassurance we struggle to give ourselves. A kind word, a compliment, or acknowledgement can feel like a balm, momentarily soothing our doubts. But the relief is temporary, and soon the need resurfaces, stronger than before, leaving us dependent on external sources for a sense of value. When validation becomes a central focus, it shapes how we interact with the world. We may begin to tailor our behavior, words, and choices to align with what we believe others expect or desire. Authenticity takes a back seat as we prioritize pleasing others over staying true to ourselves. This can lead to a disconnection from our own values and desires, as we suppress parts of ourselves that we fear may not be accepted. Over time, the person we present to the world becomes a reflection of others' expectations, rather than a genuine expression of who we are. This constant pursuit of validation often leaves us feeling empty and dissatisfied. No matter how much approval we receive, it never seems to be enough. The praise or recognition that once brought joy begins to lose its impact, requiring more frequent or greater gestures to elicit the same sense of satisfaction. This creates an insatiable cycle where we are always chasing something that cannot truly fulfill us. The deeper we fall into this pattern, the more we lose touch with the inner sense of peace and contentment that comes from self-acceptance. The need for validation also makes us vulnerable to manipulation and disappointment. When our sense of worth depends on others, we give them the power to influence how we feel about ourselves. A critical comment or lack of acknowledgement can shatter our confidence, leaving us questioning our value. This dependency on external approval can make us overly sensitive to criticism or rejection, as if our very identity is being called into question. In this state, we are at the mercy of others' perceptions, unable to stand firmly in our own truth. The constant seeking of validation can also hinder our ability to take risks or pursue paths that deviate from the norm. Fear of judgment or failure may keep us confined to choices that feel safe or widely accepted, even if they don't align with our true aspirations. In avoiding potential disapproval, we limit our growth and deprive ourselves of the chance to explore our full potential. The courage to step into the unknown, to embrace challenges and setbacks, often requires a foundation of self-assurance that is incompatible with a reliance on external validation. In seeking constant validation, we lose sight of an important truth. True fulfillment cannot be found outside of ourselves. The approval of others, while pleasant, is fleeting and cannot replace the deep and enduring sense of worth that comes from within. Until we turn inward and recognize our inherent value, independent of others' opinions, we remain trapped in a cycle of dependency and dissatisfaction. True freedom comes not from seeking validation, but from realizing that we are enough exactly as we are, without needing the world to affirm it. Overindulgence in comfort is a subtle yet profound trap that many fall into without realizing its impact. It begins with the natural human inclination to seek ease and avoid discomfort. At first it feels harmless, even necessary a reward after a long day, a brief respite from the challenges of life. But when comfort becomes a dominant pursuit, it can quietly erode our growth, resilience, and sense of purpose. Comfort, in its essence, is not inherently harmful. It provides rest, recovery, and a sense of security, all of which are essential for well-being. The danger arises when the pursuit of comfort becomes excessive, leading to stagnation. When comfort takes precedence over challenge, it dulls the drive to strive for more. Goals, aspirations, and dreams often require stepping into discomfort, facing uncertainty, and enduring effort. Yet overindulgence in comfort lulls us into a state of inertia, where the familiar feels safer than the unknown. One of the most profound effects of overindulgence in comfort is its impact on personal growth. Growth is often born from discomfort, from pushing boundaries and confronting challenges that stretch our abilities. When we prioritize comfort above all else, we avoid situations that test us, opting instead for the safety of routine and predictability. While this might shield us from immediate stress or difficulty, It also deprives us of the opportunities to learn, adapt, and evolve. The muscles of resilience, discipline, and perseverance are only strengthened through use, and overindulgence in comfort leaves them weak and underdeveloped. Comfort can also create an illusion of fulfillment, masking deeper dissatisfaction or a lack of purpose. It offers a temporary escape, distracting us from the inner restlessness that arises when we are not living in alignment with our values or potential. This escape, however, is fleeting. The satisfaction that comfort provides is often shallow and short-lived, requiring repeated indulgence to maintain. In contrast, the fulfillment that comes from facing challenges and pursuing meaningful goals is deeper and more enduring. Overindulgence in comfort robs us of this deeper satisfaction, keeping us in a cycle of temporary gratification. Another consequence of overindulgence in comfort is the narrowing of our experiences. Life in all its richness is a blend of ease and difficulty, joy and sorrow, certainty and uncertainty. When we seek only comfort, we miss out on the full spectrum of experiences that make life meaningful. Challenges, though uncomfortable, often lead to moments of profound insight, connection, and achievement. By avoiding them, we limit our capacity for growth and deprive ourselves of the richness that comes from engaging fully with life. This overindulgence can also make us more sensitive to discomfort when it inevitably arises. Life is unpredictable, and no amount of comfort can shield us from its uncertainties and difficulties. However, when we habitually avoid discomfort, we lose the ability to cope with it effectively. Minor inconveniences or challenges feel magnified, and we may find ourselves ill-equipped to navigate the complexities of life. Resilience, like a muscle, requires consistent effort to develop. Overindulgence in comfort weakens this ability, leaving us vulnerable to the inevitable storms of existence. Overindulgence in comfort often fosters complacency. It dulls the drive to improve, to strive for something greater, or to seek out meaningful change. The human spirit thrives on challenges and the pursuit of purpose. Without these, life can feel monotonous, devoid of the spark that comes from setting and achieving goals. Comfort, when overindulged, can act as a barrier to ambition, leaving us feeling stagnant and unfulfilled. The allure of comfort lies in its immediate gratification, the sense of relief and ease it provides in the moment. However, its long-term effects can be far from comforting. It is a quiet force that, left unchecked, can undermine our potential, our resilience, and our capacity to experience the fullness of life. Recognizing this allows us to step back and reevaluate, choosing to embrace the challenges that lead to growth rather than succumbing to the temporary allure of overindulgence in ease. Comparison with others is a deeply ingrained habit that often shapes the way we view ourselves and navigate the world. It is natural to look around, observe and measure ourselves against those around us. This instinct, rooted in the desire to belong and understand our place in the world, can sometimes serve as a motivation to improve. However, when it becomes a chronic behavior, it can undermine our confidence, distort our perspective, and lead to unnecessary dissatisfaction. The act of comparing begins innocently enough. We observe others' achievements, abilities, or circumstances and juxtapose them against our own. This process often stems from the belief that others' lives are benchmarks for our success or happiness. But comparison rarely offers a full picture. What we see in others is only a glimpse, often the most polished or idealized version of their reality. Yet we compare it to the entirety of our own lives, complete with all its flaws, struggles, and imperfections. This disparity in perception fuels feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt. Over time, constant comparison can erode self-esteem. When we repeatedly find ourselves lacking in comparison to others, it reinforces a narrative of inadequacy. We begin to question our abilities, diminish our accomplishments, and feel as though we are falling behind. This negative self-perception can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, as the lack of confidence undermines our motivation and hinders our ability to take risks or seize opportunities. Comparison traps us in a mindset of scarcity, where others' success feels like a threat to our own, rather than a reminder of what is possible. The habit of comparison also creates an unhealthy preoccupation with outcomes rather than processes. We become so focused on the visible results of others' efforts, be it their accomplishments, status, or material possessions, that we overlook the effort, struggles, and sacrifices that went into achieving them. This skewed perspective leads to unrealistic expectations for ourselves, as we expect immediate success without acknowledging the journey that precedes it. When we inevitably face setbacks or challenges, the weight of comparison makes them feel insurmountable. Another consequence of comparison is the loss of gratitude and contentment. When we are fixated on what others have, we fail to recognize and appreciate the abundance in our own lives. Comparison blinds us to our blessings, leading to a sense of lack and dissatisfaction. Instead of celebrating what we have achieved or experienced, we focus on what we perceive to be missing. This mindset not only diminishes our happiness but also fosters resentment and envy, further disconnecting us from a sense of fulfillment. Comparison also hinders our relationships. When we view others as competitors rather than collaborators, it fosters division rather than connection. We may struggle to celebrate others' successes, feeling threatened or diminished by their achievements. This dynamic creates distance and mistrust, preventing authentic and supportive relationships from flourishing. True connection is built on mutual respect and encouragement, but comparison disrupts this foundation, making it harder to engage with others in meaningful ways. The most profound damage of comparison lies in how it obscures our unique path. Each person's journey is shaped by their own experiences, values, and aspirations. When we compare ourselves to others, we are trying to measure one-of-a-kind lives against one another, an exercise that is inherently flawed. The beauty of individuality lies in its diversity, yet comparison reduces it to a competition. This narrow focus prevents us from embracing the richness of our own story and the potential it holds. By constantly looking outward for validation or measuring sticks, we lose sight of the inward growth that truly defines our worth. Comparison distracts us from the progress we make, the lessons we learn, and the qualities that make us uniquely valuable. In recognizing this, we can begin to shift our focus inward, celebrating our journey without diminishing the journeys of others. Uncontrolled consumption is a habit that quietly infiltrates our lives, often disguised as harmless indulgence. It thrives on the allure of abundance and convenience, presenting itself as a natural part of modern existence. Yet when left unchecked, it can lead to a cycle of excess, dissatisfaction, and disconnection from what truly matters. This habit is not limited to tangible goods. It extends to the way we consume experiences, information, and even our own time and energy. At its root, uncontrolled consumption stems from an instinctual desire to seek more. The notion that acquiring or experiencing more will bring greater happiness is deeply ingrained in human nature. However, this belief is often a mirage. The initial pleasure of consumption is fleeting, quickly replaced by a craving for the next thing. In pursuing more, we rarely pause to question whether the act of consuming truly adds value to our lives or merely fills a temporary void. The habit becomes self-perpetuating, as each momentary satisfaction feeds the belief that the answer to fulfillment lies in the next acquisition. This unchecked habit often leads to a loss of mindfulness. The ease and availability of consumption can create a sense of detachment from the act itself. When we consume without intention, we lose touch with the deeper meaning or purpose behind our choices. It becomes less about what we truly need or value and more about satisfying impulses or distractions. This lack of awareness disconnects us from the joy of truly appreciating what we have and from understanding the broader impact of our consumption habits. Uncontrolled consumption also fosters a sense of dissatisfaction. The more we consume, the more we seem to need. Each acquisition or experience raises the bar for the next, creating a cycle where contentment feels perpetually out of reach. This insatiable desire stems from the illusion that external accumulation can fulfill internal longings. In reality, the habit of constant consumption often leaves us feeling emptier as it diverts our attention from the deeper sources of joy and meaning that cannot be purchased or consumed. This habit also takes a toll on our mental and emotional well-being. The constant urge to consume can create a sense of pressure or anxiety as we feel compelled to keep up with an endless array of options and possibilities. The fear of missing out or falling behind adds to this burden, making it difficult to find peace or satisfaction in the present moment. Instead of feeling enriched by our consumption, we often feel overwhelmed, as though we are chasing a moving target that keeps slipping further away. In addition to its personal impact, uncontrolled consumption has broader implications for our relationships and the world around us. When we prioritize consuming over connecting, we risk alienating ourselves from others. Our focus shifts to what we can acquire rather than how we can contribute or connect. This not only diminishes the quality of our relationships, but also erodes the sense of community and shared purpose that brings deeper fulfillment. The habit of uncontrolled consumption perpetuates a culture of excess and waste. It encourages the mindset that resources are limitless and that the act of consuming has no consequences beyond immediate gratification. This short-sighted view ignores the interconnectedness of our actions and their impact on the environment, society, and future generations. By consuming without consideration, we contribute to a cycle that depletes resources and diminishes the quality of life for ourselves and others. Perhaps the most profound consequence of uncontrolled consumption is the way it diverts us from the pursuit of meaning and purpose. When we are caught in the cycle of acquiring and consuming, we often neglect the deeper aspects of life that bring true fulfillment. Time spent chasing the next thing could be used to nurture relationships, explore creative passions, or reflect on our values and aspirations. The habit of uncontrolled consumption keeps us focused outward, seeking satisfaction in external sources rather than cultivating the inner richness that defines a meaningful life. Breaking free from this cycle requires a shift in perspective. It calls for mindfulness and intentionality, a willingness to pause and reflect on what we truly need and value. By embracing simplicity and focusing on what truly matters, we can liberate ourselves from the endless pursuit of more and rediscover the profound contentment that comes from living with purpose and awareness. Reactive emotions are like uninvited guests that storm into our minds, demanding attention and dictating our actions. They arise swiftly and powerfully, often triggered by external circumstances or internal frustrations. While emotions are an integral part of the human experience, reactive emotions can become a source of turmoil if left unchecked. They can cloud judgment, disrupt relationships, and keep us bound to a cycle of impulsive responses that do not serve our highest good. These emotions are born from the instinctive part of our nature, the primal desire to protect, assert, or defend. They are deeply rooted in our survival mechanisms, designed to react swiftly to perceived threats. While this response may have been beneficial in the past, in modern life it often leads to unnecessary conflict and suffering. Reactive emotions flare up in moments of anger, jealousy, fear, or frustration, pushing us to act before we have time to reflect. They demand immediate expression, often with little regard for the consequences. The power of reactive emotions lies in their ability to hijack our awareness. When we are in their grip, we become consumed by the emotion itself, losing sight of the bigger picture. A fleeting annoyance can spiral into full-blown anger, a momentary insecurity can deepen into resentment, and a minor disappointment can escalate into despair. Reactive emotions thrive on exaggeration, magnifying situations and distorting our perspective. In their intensity, they can make even small challenges feel insurmountable. One of the most destructive aspects of reactive emotions is the way they influence our relationships. When we react impulsively, we often say or do things that we later regret. Harsh words spoken in anger or actions driven by jealousy can leave lasting scars, damaging trust and connection. The reactive mind is not concerned with understanding or empathy. It is focused solely on self-preservation or self-expression. This lack of consideration can alienate us from those we care about, creating distance where there should be closeness. Reactive emotions also rob us of clarity and wisdom. They push us to act on impulse rather than intention, leading to decisions that are not aligned with our values or goals. In moments of emotional reactivity, we lose the ability to think critically or assess situations rationally. The immediate need to satisfy the emotion overshadows the long-term perspective, and we often find ourselves trapped in patterns of behavior that perpetuate the same problems. Reactive emotions are not just fleeting feelings, they can set the tone for how we approach life if we allow them to dominate our responses. Over time, unchecked reactive emotions can create a cycle of guilt and frustration. We may recognize the harm caused by our impulsive reactions, but without understanding how to address them, we find ourselves repeating the same patterns. This cycle can erode our sense of self-control and confidence, leaving us feeling at the mercy of our emotions. The weight of regret or shame that follows reactive outbursts can be heavy, compounding the original pain and making it harder to move forward. Reactive emotions often stem from unaddressed inner conflicts or unresolved wounds. They are amplified by fear, insecurity, or unmet needs that linger beneath the surface. When these underlying issues are ignored, they fester, making us more susceptible to emotional reactivity. A minor irritation becomes a trigger for deeper frustrations, and the response is disproportionate to the situation at hand. By failing to address the root causes, we remain vulnerable to being swept away by emotions that seem beyond our control. Reactive emotions highlight the need for greater awareness and self-regulation. They offer a mirror, reflecting areas where we are not yet free. Every reactive outburst is an opportunity to pause and reflect, to ask what lies beneath the surface and why we feel compelled to respond in a certain way. When we approach reactive emotions with curiosity rather than judgment, we can begin to unravel their hold over us. Instead of seeing them as enemies, we can view them as teachers, guiding us toward greater understanding of ourselves. The journey to overcoming reactive emotions is not about suppressing them or pretending they do not exist. It is about cultivating the ability to respond rather than react. This requires patience, mindfulness, and a commitment to personal growth. It means creating space between the stimulus and our reaction, allowing time for thoughtful consideration. By doing so, we reclaim our power, choosing actions that are aligned with our values rather than driven by fleeting feelings. In understanding and addressing reactive emotions, we move closer to a state of inner balance. We learn to navigate life's challenges with greater grace and resilience, no longer at the mercy of emotions that pull us in every direction. Instead, we become steady, grounded, and intentional, able to face the complexities of life with clarity and strength. Reactive emotions may always be a part of the human experience, but with awareness and effort, they need not control it. Excuses for inaction are subtle yet powerful barriers that keep us from reaching our potential. They often appear reasonable on the surface, cloaked in logic or circumstance, making them easy to justify. Yet at their core, they serve one purpose: to shield us from discomfort, effort, or the fear of failure. These excuses act as a comfortable refuge, offering temporary relief, while quietly eroding our confidence, opportunities, and growth. The allure of an excuse lies in its ability to shift responsibility. It allows us to point to external factors as the reason for our stagnation, rather than facing the internal resistance that holds us back. Whether it's a lack of time, insufficient resources, or waiting for the right moment, excuses create a narrative where progress seems impossible. This narrative can be so convincing that we begin to believe it wholeheartedly, building a story around why action is out of reach. In doing so, we avoid confronting the truth that in most cases we have more power and agency than we are willing to acknowledge. Excuses often arise from a fear of imperfection or failure. The thought of taking action and not succeeding can feel overwhelming, leading us to rationalize why it's better to wait or avoid the effort altogether. We convince ourselves that the conditions must be perfect, that more preparation is needed, or that we are not yet ready. While these thoughts may seem prudent, they are often just a sophisticated way of avoiding risk. By delaying action, we believe we are protecting ourselves from disappointment. But in reality, we are ensuring that nothing changes. This habit of making excuses becomes a form of self-sabotage. Each time we allow an excuse to dictate our actions, we reinforce a pattern of avoidance. The longer we delay, the more daunting the task appears, creating a cycle where inaction becomes the default. This cycle not only stalls our progress, but also diminishes our belief in our ability to overcome challenges. Over time, excuses can become a defining feature of our mindset, shaping how we approach opportunities and setbacks alike. Excuses also rob us of momentum. Action, no matter how small, generates energy and confidence. It creates a sense of progress that fuels further effort. In contrast, excuses keep us stagnant, perpetuating a state of inertia. The longer we remain inactive, the harder it becomes to break free. This stagnation can lead to feelings of frustration or helplessness, as we watch time pass without any meaningful change. The regret of missed opportunities often outweighs the initial discomfort of taking action, yet excuses blind us to this reality. Excuses often mask deeper insecurities or doubts. They allow us to avoid facing the uncertainty that comes with change or growth. By staying within the boundaries of what feels safe, we avoid the vulnerability of stepping into the unknown. However, this safety is an illusion. True security and confidence come from taking risks, learning from failures, and proving to ourselves that we are capable of more than we think. Excuses prevent us from experiencing these transformative moments, keeping us confined to a limited version of ourselves. Excuses also affect our relationships and interactions with others. When we make excuses for inaction, we often project blame onto circumstances or people, creating tension or misunderstanding. We may disappoint those who rely on us or miss opportunities to connect and collaborate. Excuses not only hinder our personal growth, but also limit our ability to contribute meaningfully to the world around us. They create a ripple effect, where inaction in one area can spill over into others, affecting both ourselves and those we care about. Overcoming excuses requires a shift in perspective. It begins with recognizing them for what they are: barriers we create to shield ourselves from discomfort. This awareness allows us to challenge the narratives we tell ourselves and question whether the reasons for inaction are truly valid. Often we find that the obstacles we perceive are not as insurmountable as they seem. By taking even the smallest step forward, we break the spell of inertia and begin to reclaim our agency. Taking responsibility for our actions is key to breaking free from excuses. It means accepting that while circumstances may not always be ideal, we have the power to choose how we respond. This mindset fosters resilience as we learn to navigate challenges rather than avoiding them. Each time we take action, despite our excuses, we build confidence in our ability to adapt and persevere. This confidence becomes a foundation for further growth, replacing the habit of excuse-making with one of proactive effort. Excuses for inaction may provide temporary comfort, but they come at a significant cost. They keep us from living fully, from pursuing our dreams, and from becoming the person we are capable of being. By confronting and challenging these excuses, we open the door to a life of greater possibility and purpose. The path forward is not always easy, but it is always within reach. In reflecting on the nature of excuses for inaction, it becomes clear that these barriers, while seemingly protective, ultimately hinder our growth and potential. They cloak our fears and insecurities, allowing us to remain in the comfort of stagnation rather than embracing the discomfort that comes with progress. Each excuse we accept as valid diminishes our confidence and reinforces a cycle of avoidance that stifles our aspirations. To break free from this cycle, we must cultivate a mindset of accountability and resilience. By acknowledging the excuses that keep us bound, we can challenge their validity and take decisive action, even in the face of uncertainty. Each small step we take dismantles the barriers we have created and empowers us to reclaim our agency. As we confront these excuses, we open ourselves to the richness of experiences, opportunities, and relationships that come from living authentically and purposefully. It is through this journey of self-discovery and proactive engagement that we transform not only our own lives, but also inspire those around us. By choosing to act despite our fears and doubts, we pave the way for a future filled with possibilities, growth, and fulfillment. Embracing this transformative process is the key to unlocking our true potential and realizing the life we truly desire.